Good afternoon from Wilmington, North Carolina, as we come on the air with the latest on Hurricane Florence. It's now a Category 2 storm and just beginning to make its presence felt up and down the coast. The winds have picked up, the rain has begun, and the potentially catastrophic storm surge, a massive wall of water, is expected in the coming hours. As many as 1 million people have evacuated inland to higher ground, but many have stayed behind to take their chances against what is expected to be a very dangerous next several days.
Hurricane Florence slammed into this state, making landfall today and carving a deadly path. Here in Wilmington at the airport, not far from where we're standing right here, wind gusts reaching 105 miles per hour at one point, not seen since Hurricane Helene in 1958.
The rain will barely let up here on this coast for another 24 hours. The preliminary rainfall totals from Florence are staggering. The National Weather Service says more than 30 inches of rain was measured in Swansboro, North Carolina. That shatters the state's tropical system rainfall record of more than 24 inches set during Hurricane Floyd in 1999.
The worst winds we're expecting to come overnight. We're talking about those hurricane force winds, 100 miles an hour. Plus, over there is the town of Beaufort, North Carolina. They are expecting a storm surge, unprecedented levels at 7.5 feet. The last time they had a catastrophic storm was back in the 1950s, and that one did incredible amounts of damage.
This hurricane has been terrifying for so many here. The city of New Bern, north of here, trapped between two rivers. The flooding was almost immediate. Before the sun even came up, hundreds trapped in their homes with fast rising water. We were embedded with the rescue teams there, racing to get to them, and you'll see what we witnessed.
Video taken Thursday night shows the damage from wind gusts topping 100 miles an hour. They were strong enough to tear the roofs and facades off stores and destroy gas stations. In Morehead City, all that's left of this building is a pile of crumbled wood. Much of the wind damage was done even before the storm surge there poured into the streets. This school in Jacksonville suffered significant damage inside as the panels tore from the ceiling and water rained down inside classrooms. And in Wilmington, hurricane-force winds blew transformers, putting much of the city in darkness.
From Washington, the president and CEO of the American Red Cross, Gail McGovern. Gail, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me on the show, Vlad. I appreciate it.
So what are some of the challenges that the Red Cross is facing as the recovery effort begins?
So we also have problems with accessibility and communications, but we're really fortunate. We have a great relationship with state government, and they were able to commission the National Guard, and they were kind enough to get us high water vehicles and drivers, and we were able to get supplies and people to needed areas. They even provided helicopters and our folks and brought supplies and volunteers that way as well. As the water recedes, it'll be easier to get in and out, but we did what we could in very complicated circumstances, and we're just so grateful that we were able to get those vehicles.
And yet the Red Cross has a history of helping Americans in situations like this in their time of need. Was there anything, though, specifically about Florence that posed sort of a unique challenge? Because you had the governor, everyone from the president of the United States to the governor to the head of FEMA saying that this was going to be a storm of historic proportions. At this point in the history of the Red Cross in dealing with devastation like this, you would assume that there isn't something you haven't seen, but was this something you hadn't seen before?
Well, every storm is a little bit different. Every storm has different challenges. And this was one of the largest storms in my tenure at the American Red Cross. The lack of accessibility is something that was very complicated. And the fact that the rivers flood at different times and crest at different times, it can be completely sunny out, and then suddenly the banks are flooded and the water rises again. So it was unusual from that respect. And we were fortunate that we had pre-positioned a lot of supplies because we were tracking the storm. We have 3,600 wonderful workers on the ground in the impacted area. Most of them are volunteers that leave their families and spend weeks with us responding, including working 12-hour shifts 7 days a week. and we were able to get about 70 trailers worth of supplies into the impacted area. And we also have 130 emergency response vehicles that will be fanning out into the community as the floodwaters recede, giving hot meals. So it's massive storm, and that is always poses challenges, and we're attempting to meet each one as they come along.
When I was doing Katrina and Ruby, everybody was on board. FEMA was there. The people from other states were coming in to help. The state was there. I remember being in one of the big shelters in one of the like an arena kind of place, and the governor of Louisiana was there speaking to the people and telling what they were doing, and certainly local people are having to do it too. So it's everybody's on board. They do different things, I suppose, at different levels. Like FEMA's bringing in trailers and stuff like that they wouldn't have at the state level. Okay. State is doing state infrastructure, locals doing local infrastructure. The federal government has emergency money that they send lots and lots of that usually. One of the sad things that I became aware of when I was down there is that most people have insurance on their property, and the insurance companies were absolutely horrible. If they had water coverage, then the company would say, well, this isn't water damage, it was the wind pushing the water that caused the damage. If they had wind damage, they would say, oh no, it's the water that did that. And the insurance companies were just bailing out every way they could possibly come up with to not help people get money to help them recover. We couldn't go in until the hazmat people were sure that it was safe to go in. We went down to this one beach called Holly Beach that was a resort beach, and families had had houses there for generations. And they let us in on the first day that they let the families back so that we could do counseling with the families coming in and helping them understand trauma and loss and all of that. The only way that you could tell the way the wind went through was by the way the telephone poles were leaning. And people were walking around, they couldn't even tell where their house foundations had been. And I remember one person going, oh gosh, here's my grandma's gumbo pot, they just happened to find and recognize, or this is the linoleum off of our bathroom floor. It was just gone. So they couldn't let anybody in until the hazmat people, the people who knew that kind of thing, could make sure that we were safe doing that. They had National Guard down there. Definitely did have a big variety of that. They had a camp. It's kind of down near Holly Beach, no, near Cameron actually. And we could go there for food or to take showers if we wanted to. We're mostly living in a high school or middle school gym. But FEMA comes in and provides cots for everybody, and they give you an allowance, like if you need to buy a air mattress or something like that, they'll give you an allowance for it. At least they did for the Red Cross, the people that I was with. And then there are all of these organizations, like the Baptist Men is a huge feeding kind of organization. And I mean, you look at any disaster, and those guys are on the spot as soon as they can get traffic through there, and everybody knows them, and everybody knows that they know what they're doing, and they feed people by the thousands when there's a situation like that where there's no way for these people to cook or get food or anything like that. So I think it's somewhat like in their case, it just depends on the fact that they've got a track record with the people who are controlling things for doing a good job and knowing what they're doing and being helpful. There didn't seem to be a really clear protocol, but it was like when it's safe, you can go in.
Okay. And that was established by the hazmat people or national?
Probably the military. I would think if they're there, that would be the first thing. Like I said, they probably overlap. The locals do as much as they can, and then the state steps in, and the state can step in because the feds have declared emergency and offered them the money. Mm-hmm.
The hardest part after the hurricane, after the flood, is realizing that you've got to do it all over again. That's our situation this time around. So we went a few months, with no heat or air, and we made do. It was okay, but not the best of situations, but it was okay. So lots and lots of issues. You have a lot of groups that come out at times like this. You have a ton of church groups that come. The Baptist men come and they set up, and again, this time they did meals every day for, I know it was over a month. There's still all kinds of services you can get. I know that they are still handing out paper products and things like that. I work at the local library, and what I do is I go in the schools and read and do crafts with generally Head Start age children. And a lot of that stuff is state and government funded, so they were able to recoup fairly quickly. What you don't see happen fairly quickly is people's personal property. If you do not have flood insurance, then you get no help. So you have to rely on applying for FEMA. And you'll hear about millions and millions of dollars coming into one area, and you're like, oh, that's great, everybody's going to be helped and get all their stuff fixed, and that's just not true. People get a very small amount. For example, if you have $25,000 worth of damage to your house, then from FEMA maybe you'll get $5,000 or $6,000. I applied. We did not have flood insurance. We do now. We did not have flood insurance, and so I applied, and of course we were denied immediately. And I did all the proper things to appeal it, and I wrote a letter also, and I was like, we work full time, we pay our taxes. Is there not anything that we can get to help us? This is $4,200, not to mention many other things. A lot of things people don't think about is you have to go dump out everything in your fridge and your freezer. That's hundreds of dollars worth of money. You got to replace it. You don't get anything for that. Okay, I take that back. You can apply and get emergency food stamps, but I guess you would need to be in a certain income bracket to get that. Supposedly anybody can get the emergency stamps, but that's just not something that we tried to do. We just threw out everything and replaced it again. So there's several $100s there. Anyways, after fighting with FEMA back and forth and appealing it, I finally did get a very small portion, but I was like, okay, we'll take it. It's not much, but it made a teeny tiny dent, and the rest we'll just have to do. So we did. Again, lots of organizations come in at times like this. You have political organizations that come in. You have, like I said, many church organizations will come in. I mean, you've got some pretty big groups out there. There's a huge group of Mormons, Amish, Baptist, and they come for emergencies such as this, and they jump in there and they help. Now, if it's something you've got to pay for, like new wood or floors or anything like that, you've got to pay for that, but they're offering their labor for free. They'll come and cut down trees that are in your yard and, like I said, muck out underneath the house. You cannot explain the smell after a time like this. The whole town stinks for weeks. That flood water has come in and it's sewage, or oil spilled in it, or gas spilled in it. And again, sewage. You've got all these animals outside, not to mention actual sewage problems. So I can't explain to you the smell for weeks afterwards.
Recently, we were able to get in touch with Jeff Blackburn from Hyde Park Baptist Church, and he emailed in his responses. And the first question that we asked him was, what was the hardest thing you noticed the victims going through? And his response was, a serious lack of hope. These families did not have enough insurance coverage or help from FEMA to rebuild their homes and purchase furniture and household items. They went into debt through credit cards and second mortgages on their homes to rebuild, thinking they would never see another flood of this magnitude in their lifespan. Once Florence struck, these families knew they had little to no financial ability to rebuild. This resulted in palatable hopelessness that spread across our congregation, city, and county. And secondly, we were able to ask what parts of the cleanup were they responsible for. And the response was, we were a disaster relief site for 3 organizations immediately after the storm. North Carolina Missions, which is part of the North Carolina Baptist Association, FEMA, and Red Cross. Initially, our primary concern immediately after the storm was water, food, and shelter. We provided over 200,000 meals to people in need from our church campus over a 4-week period, 7 days per week. During that same time frame, we were actively engaged in mud-outs for several homes. This is the process of removing all flooring, insulation under the homes, HVAC ductwork, etc. All furniture and personal belonging that was in the flood water and subfloors were also removed as needed, and we are currently involved in the rebuilding process, providing volunteers and financial support to people in need. Lastly, we were able to ask how much of the cleanup were the individuals responsible for, and his response was, the homeowners often help with the mud-outs and rebuilding process. Many of the people we have helped are single mothers, widows, or senior adults who are not able to help with the process. It is not a requirement that the homeowner help, but we welcome it when they are able. The homeowner is responsible for contacting their insurance company, FEMA, or other organizations at the state and federal level that are set up to assist in disaster relief. If funds are received by the homeowner from one or all of these organizations, they must be used for materials to rebuild, relocate, for furniture or supplies to move back into their home.